if I want to warm you up as a podcast listener, I must add more value to you, whatever that means. All right, whatever that means. Podcast Growth Nation, welcome back to another very special episode of Podcast Growth University, where we talk all things podcasts all the time. I hope you enjoyed last episode. Last week's episode was number 11, how to turn your podcast into a business. So again, it was a high-level understanding of how each part of your podcast business has to touch one another. So social media has to go to the podcast, has to go to whatever's below the podcast, so on and so forth. I am happy to dive deeper into that if people want to hear more. I love talking about that aspect of it, but it is challenging at times because I can only be so specific to what people are going through because everybody's business is a little bit different. Today, for episode number 12, the 3 buckets of podcast listeners. So, through the last, through the last 5 years, we have definitely studied and figured out, okay, why do we have high listens this month and then listen seems to trickle down? And then the next month, listens are really high, and then they're low again, and then they're low for a couple months. How does that happen? Why does that happen? I have gotten to the point now where I believe there are 3 buckets of podcast listeners, and there are habits that you can build in to make sure that you're nurturing each bucket. So the first bucket of podcast listeners, I call them cold eyes. So cold eyes are people who don't know you yet, they don't like you yet, and they don't trust you yet. So say you give a speech, right? I did a summit yesterday morning. Every single one of the people at the summit, that's a cold eye. That's somebody who doesn't know me, like me, or trust me yet. Now, for most of us, cold eyes are going to be the biggest bucket because we're not going to have everybody in the world listening to us. So what is one habit that you can practice every single day to try to get more cold eyes to come into your podcast business, to start listening to the podcast, to follow you on social media, whatever it may be? This is why social media is so important, because that's where many of us get new people into our environment. We get new people to follow us on social media, then they work their way down our business model like we talked about in the last episode. So number 1 is cold eyes. These are people who don't know you, they don't like you, they don't trust you. I go on a lot of other podcasts for this reason. So this is the thought. People like podcasts. I go on another podcast, and if they like what I'm talking about, maybe they'll come check out our other podcast. So it's a cold eye that could turn into a potential short-term or long-term listener. So one habit you could practice every day is, honestly, you could follow people on social media. You could reach out to somebody watching your story every single day on whatever social media platforms you're using. You could... that really is probably the best too, really, because many of us now are in this digital virtual space where if you have a social media, you probably have thousands of people that you could be building relationships with. And it's as simple as just sending them a message and saying, hey, Kev, I hope all is well. Or, hey, if it's somebody you used to hang out with or somebody you went to high school with, hey, congratulations on the new home, congratulations on the family, congratulations on the baby. It's not you reaching out and saying, hey, listen to this podcast. It's you just starting a conversation and or adding value to somebody. So yesterday at the end of the summit, my final slide was a picture of Next Level University's artwork and my email address as well as my social media handle. And I said, if anybody wants any help or you have any questions about anything, do not hesitate to reach out. And I literally said, like I say on this podcast, I said, I'm happy to offer everybody here a free 30-minute call. I'm not going to sell you on anything. I just want to help. And the host of the summit is somebody I did a free call with. And she said, Kevin is a man of his word, and I've done a free call, and it was truly wonderful, and I've learned so much from that and since then. So my goal, ultimately, is to add value on this summit, bring as many cold eyes as possible to the next step, which is warm eyes. So we have cold eyes, people who don't know us, don't like us, don't trust us. Next bucket, warm/warming eyes. So if you didn't listen to episode number 11, make sure you go back, because when I say warm/warming, this is what the business is all about. So think about this. You follow me on social media. You're kind of now a potential warm eye. So let's just say you listen to the podcast. You listen to our podcast, Next Level University, or this one. You're a warm eye now. You know me, you like me, and you trust me at least to tune in enough to tune into the episode. Cool. Now, my ultimate goal is to warm the relationship more through value. So here's the thing. If you listen to the podcast, the next thing for you is our private Facebook group, which is a deeper dive into getting to know us a little bit better. Under that, we have a live podcast that we do every week. We have a monthly virtual event that we do. We have a bunch of things where I want you to know us, like us, and trust us at a deeper level. Therefore, we can add more value to your life. So when I say warm, that means it's a listener, right? If you can pick out a listener and say, oh, I know this person is listening, cool. That's a warm person. They're in the warm bucket. But my question to you is, what are you doing to warm that relationship every day? Because that's where people get stuck. They say, well, I have people that listen to the podcast, but there's nowhere for them to go to further our relationship. So we have the cold bucket, people who don't know us, don't like us, don't trust us. We have the warm bucket, people who know us, like us, and trust us, / warming. How do we get them to know us, like us, and trust us at a deeper level? Again, you're building a business. Your podcast ultimately is a business, and you have to make sure you're moving people through the business based on value. So this is my thought. If I want to warm you up as a podcast listener, I must add more value to you, whatever that means, all right? Whatever that means. So if I do a free call with somebody, I can add more value to them, and they most likely will be quote unquote warmer. And here's a good example. I did a free call with somebody probably like 2 years ago maybe. And this person was somebody in our community, somebody who was thinking about maybe starting a podcast, but it wasn't a podcast call. It was just hey, I want to get to know the listeners. Tell me a little bit about yourself and what I might be able to do to help you. That person ended up doing group coaching a year later. A full year later, they ended up doing our group coaching program, and now they're on our team. And that's just the power of warming the people who are already warm.
I just wanted to take a quick second and give a shout out and a huge thank you to Next Level Podcasting Solutions, Kevin and his team. They have been incredible to work with, very flexible, on the spot with any questions that I have or any concerns that I have. When I first started out my podcast, I was doing everything on my own. I have no editing background. I have no podcasting background. I knew nothing about it. And so I was bootstrapping all of this myself while I was still trying to take on my role as a full-time mom. And once I met up with Kevin and we had these discussions and I got on board with adding an editing team, oh my goodness, it just lifted this weight off of me. It lifted my time that I was spending doing my editing. And in the beginning, full transparency, when I was editing just my individual recordings, it was a little more manageable, not super manageable. And then when I started doing my interviews for the podcast, it was hours upon hours of me doing the editing that didn't include any of the promotional material that I am now getting from Kevin and his team. It wouldn't have been sustainable. I would not have been able to keep up with that. So I recommend Kevin and his team. They have done wonderful work in helping me grow my podcast. I have really enjoyed working with the editing team, and it definitely feels like more of a team environment versus me hiring them to do a specific job. I mean, we all work collaboratively on the projects that I have, and I have these crazy ideas sometimes, and they come up with a solution to fit my needs. I can't recommend them enough. I've really enjoyed working with them. Kevin and the Next Level Podcasting Solutions, thank you so much for the work that you have done in the past and are continuing to do for me. I'm growing this community and growing this platform with a beautiful team that is working for me and with me to see my vision and help that come to life. So thank you again so much. I really appreciate you guys.
The final bucket, and today's going to be a shorter episode because I promised shorter episodes in the past, and I have not been keeping them short. The third bucket is, and this is a pretty big bucket for most people, especially, after you get through the first couple months, this is where things start to get a little weird. The third bucket is lost eyes. So these are people who know you, like you, and trust you, but they kind of forgot about you. And this is how I understood this is a valuable, important bucket. One day when I think I had some time in between calls or I had a slow day, I went back in my DMs like back to the beginning of the podcast. So this was probably like 2 years ago. I went back and I looked at who was I having conversations with when the podcast first started, maybe like 6 months in, maybe a year in. And then who am I having conversations with now? And it's very interesting because you can see there are certain people who just fall off. And there's certain people who move on with their lives, or they go listen to something else, or something changes in their lives, and they become a lost eye. You no longer have that person's attention. They're no longer a warm eye. What you can do is the same thing that I've been talking about for the first two buckets, really, is you have to re-engage through social media. That really, or email list if you have an email list, but that really is the best way, because we're still in this unique place where you connecting to your podcast audience is not directly through a podcast app yet. There isn't really a way to do that yet. I mean, yeah, you can start WhatsApp groups and stuff like that, but in the beginning, it's challenging to do that, and that's only so sustainable. So this is the importance of you consciously, intentionally saying, I'm going to go build relationships with people today. So I'm on social media every single day trying to build relationships. And when I say trying to build relationships, I don't want it to come off as a negative thing. It's just I'm liking people's stuff, because if I like it, I'm going to like it. If I like somebody's content, I'll share it. I check in on people and say, hey, how is everything? I send that message all the time. Hey, blank, I hope all is well. It's not just me reminding them that I'm still here. It's me trying to add value first. I want them to know I'm a real human being who really cares, because I believe that will add up in the long run. So if you want to recapture lost eyes, you just have to re-engage. You have to re-engage and then rebuild the relationship. And from what I've seen, these are really the three buckets of listeners. If I would add a fourth, it would probably be like the family bucket. And when I say family, I don't mean blood family. I mean raving fan. I don't like to say we have fans. I don't like that term. I don't like that word. I think we have a family. We have a wonderful family of podcast listeners who are focused on growth on our other show. And this will be a wonderful family of podcasters who want to grow their podcasts. I don't want to consider it fans. But again, you do you. If you want to, you can. So I would say the fourth bucket would probably be quote unquote raving fans. And these are the people who share everything. They come to everything. That's an important understanding to have too, because these are the people that you go to when you need reviews and you say, hey, have you left a review yet? These are the people that you reach out to first when you're starting a new program or you have a course or whatever it may be. These are the people that are going to share your content. You can always ask them to share it. These are the people that are going to end up on your team if you start making a team. These are the people who might come to a live event. So it's important to understand that, but that takes some time. Getting a family built, that can take a lot of time, especially if you're doing one episode a week. It's not as fast. Now, I'm not telling you should be doing more than one episode a week. We do 7, and it took us 5 years to get there. And I do this too, so I do 8. But that's a different thing, because that's my main job, and that's the business and all that stuff. So I really want you to think to yourself, how am I working with the 3 buckets of listeners every day? What am I doing to go find cold eyes? What am I doing to nurture my warm eyes by warming them more? What am I doing to find my lost eyes? And then what am I doing to pour into the eyes of my quote-unquote super fans, my family, whatever you want that to be considered? If you can do one action under all 4 of those buckets, I guarantee you will be more successful. I guarantee it. And it's an understanding that it's a long game. So I have clients at times where they'll have a 1,000 download month, and then they'll have like a 750 download month, and they get down a little bit. And I say, well, you have to understand, this is kind of par for the course. There will be ebbs, and there will be flows, there will be ups and downs, but as long as the trend line is moving in the right direction, that's really all I care about. And just as an example, I was on the phone with, I have a client who, they're 2 women in business together. And we were talking about how we're only halfway through the month and they're already on pace to have their highest month ever. And I said, what changed? What happened? And this is the realization we got to. You must have come into some sort of pile of cold eyes that converted over to warm. I said, what have you done differently? Did you do something different with social media? Were you in front of certain crowds? Like, what can we point this to so we can double down and triple down on that? So understand that the actions that you're taking every single day are going to add up, whether you're taking positive actions or whether you're taking negative actions. So last time, I'll go through it one more time. The 3 buckets. Number 1, we have cold eyes. People who don't know us, like us, or trust us. Number 2, warm/warming. Number 3, we have lost eyes. People who still like us. They just have moved on. Maybe they forgot about us. And then the 4th and final bucket, I guess the bonus bucket, is family, aka superfans. If you can do one habit, one task under each bucket per day, I guarantee you will be better off for sure. And this is something I wish I knew early on. It took me a long time to break it down to this because it seems very simple, but I think at times you can get lost in the day-to-day minutia of being a podcaster. So that's always a challenge. As always, if you are looking to learn more about podcasting, if you're looking to get your awareness raised on podcasting, maybe you just want to throw some questions at somebody who's been doing it for maybe longer than you have, I will always have my link in the description or in the show notes for a free call. Again, I'm not going to try to sell you on anything. I just want to add value. And I know that it can be hard to find out things about podcasts. Yeah, you could find out what equipment to use and how to audio edit and video edit and all that stuff. But when it comes to building a podcast business, there's not a lot of content on there because not a lot of people have done it. I mean, that's the truth. So if you're ever interested, please book a free 30-minute call with me. I guarantee it will be a good time, and I want to get to know you behind the scenes, figure out what people are struggling with. I appreciate that very, very, very much. Podcast growth people next week for episode number 13. Oh, this is going to be a fun one. People are very supportive in the beginning. I've had many clients who they get off to a start and they say, this is awesome. I'm getting a lot of shares and my friends are looking at me different. And now I'm a podcaster. And a month or 2 after that, things start to pitter patter out. Why is that? And can you expect that? And what can you do about it? That will be next week's episode, lucky number 13. As always, I appreciate you all. I hope all the podcasting is going in a positive direction. And thank you again for tuning in to Podcast Growth University, where we talk all things podcasts all the time. Have a wonderful day, and I will talk to you next week, podcast people.